Awesome. And we are live. Everyone,
Live.
welcome. Glenn, welcome back for,
Thank you, brother.
I think, the third time, probably. I think you're
It's a hat trick.
Yeah. And we did this exactly this time last year. We did a little look back and a look forward into what we thought 2021 was going to look like. So we'll cover that. I've got my tea ready, actually. Thought I'd make myself a nice cup of tea. So I've got the tea. We'll have a look back at how right or wrong we were about 2021 and dive into a few of those, and then a little look forward to 2022. So if anyone's got any questions, pop them in the comments. If you're watching after the event, feel free to drop me or Glenn a DM. I'm sure he won't mind. And I hope you enjoy it. So, Glenn, there's a lot gone on this year.
Just a little bit. Last 18, 20 months, I would say, quite a seismic shift on how we live and work, right?
Oh yeah. Even the last, I can't even believe we're like rounding up 2021. I know it's not quite over, but it's gone quick. Is it what you thought it would be? If you look back.
That was like a loaded question. Just kind of was it what any of us thought it would be? I think that I've been grateful to continue to work with kind of startups and scale-ups over the last 12 months, which has been great. And I think equally as well, and we'll get into this, some of the predictions that we were discussing this time last year, or this time, previously, we were kind of, will they happen? When they happen, certain factors have to influence them, and obviously, hybrid working, remote working is one of those ones we touched upon. But I think I've been impressed by people I work with, certainly within the kind of recruitment community, peers, and the companies. I've been impressed by the adaptability to continue to kind of deliver, which has been certainly a positive.
It has been a massive opportunity for companies to reflect and really change their way they work, because everyone's talking about this big resignation, but I just can't help but feel, and I wrote a post on this the other day, that it's just a big resignation from bad companies that treat people badly with bad cultures where people are not valued. I think a lot of the really good companies aren't having that problem. They keep the staff, the ones that have really looked after them. I spoke to a guy this week, and a lot of companies cut quite deep, didn't really look after their people over the pandemic, and I think that's catching up with caught up with some companies.
Completely agree. That's one of the questions I got asked a lot when we started to come out of lockdown in the UK. When I was kind of pre-screening individuals that were interested in job opportunities, they were like, okay, how has that company treated their staff during, the last sort of 12 to 18 months? Did they put people on furlough? How resilient was the business model, like the commercial model? So, individuals now looking in the market, that's one of their key calibration points. How did you treat your current employees over the last, kind of 12 to 18 months? And to your point around the great resignation, it is only relevant for companies that have been really poor in that regard,
Definitely. Our first trend, this leads us on nicely, actually, because we did a few, but I've picked three. And number one for me was culture. And we both thought it was super important. And, building a culture aligns with people's values. And this whole COVID thing, treating people kindly, treating them like humans. Everyone's different, right? There's no one size fits all. So I think for me and you, culture was key. And I think you did agree with me, culture first. And to your point, a lot of candidates, when they're looking to choose a new employer, and that has been a shift, by the way, like people choosing an employer versus, why do you want to come work here? Culture's number one. Do you think that's held true?
Oh, for sure. I think culture will continue to be a key deciding factor for individuals looking for opportunities now. I think it's kind of so perhaps, and I'm talking generally here. I think the last, certainly the last 12 to 18 months, individuals have had an opportunity to step back from that kind of day to day of being, in the kind of cadence of going into the office, going to work, etc. They've had an opportunity to step back and really think about what's important to them, and really start to articulate what their values are, and then be confident to articulate what those values are at work, and then hold their employers accountable to their own values. And I think
Yes.
that's the key thing, and that manifests in the culture. Culture, I think, it's an organic thing. It's not something you one particular department within the business owns. It's an organic thing, and people contribute and detract from that culture depending on their actions on a day-to-day basis. So I think culture will undoubtedly continue to be a trend per se, but it's something that companies will focus on and continue to focus on. And if they're not, and if they do think it's a trend, they'll stop putting kind of effort into really kind of supporting and nurturing that culture.
Yeah, I think culture's not just a trend, it's here. It's not just free snacks and a football table.
Exactly.
Pre-COVID, it was like, we do free snacks, we've got a free school table, we've got the pool table and stuff, and that's a great culture. But it's not, Simon Sinek, and I'm going to really devastate his quote here, but he said, customers won't love your company until your employees love it first. Which I think just sums it up so nicely. If you don't look after your people, and you don't find out what they want, what makes them tick, what they want, all of those things, how are your customers going to love your company?
Yeah, I think it's twofold in so much as, and I completely agree, there's listening to your employees through kind of employee engagement surveys, etc. That for me is kind of listening in a kind of pseudo passive way. Then there's active listening. Are you actively listening to them? Because if you actively listen to them, one, you empower them to talk and express freely their thoughts around your culture, your environment, and you advocate for them. You want them to contribute to that kind of conversation around how the company environment affects the way they work, and equally the people around them. So I think I agree with you. I think it's that active listening is a key differentiator for me.
Yeah, and being kind. If people feel like you're being nice and kind to them genuinely, they're not going to want to leave. They're going to want to work and stay in that environment. You're going to find it easier to attract people. So for the companies that are thinking, I've been really affected by the Great Resignation. My jobs are open for a long time. People are leaving. Like I would really think about the culture. Don't just write it off. It's the Great Resignation. Of course, every company's losing people like this. I think go in. It's quite nuanced conversation to think about how you're treating people.
Yeah, I think it's also that the spotlight comes on leaders within the business. Are they really contributing in a positive way to the culture? How do they turn up? How intentional are they in terms of that kind of living and being an embodiment of the kind of culture and values of the business? It's not enough just to talk about them in an interview as part of a kind of sort of process. They need to be lived for them to be real, and that then contributes to the culture. So I think certainly over the last 12 to 18 months, there's been a spotlight and a greater emphasis on leaders in terms of their adaptability and how they then look to engage their people.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it is tough. I mean, a lot of leaders were adapting to this whole thing too, right? You had like burnout, all levels, trying to adjust. But the culture thing, I mean, just as you said, listening, asking people what they want, speaking to people, it's so critical. So I think that's a trend that we I wouldn't say we predicted, but a lot of people were speaking about it. But I think that's really held true this year in all manners, recruitment, retention, and all of that stuff. So
100%.
That's here to stay. Leads us on to the other one is hybrid working, which clearly, well, let's say hybrid actually, because hybrid might be the wrong word, because some people are fully remote.
Yeah.
Some people are clearly clearly office-based workers, i.e., I don't know, healthcare workers, like they go to work, right? But for us that we could do our job from home, so office-based workers, we have the luxury of choosing whether we go in or not.
Yeah.
How do you think that has materialized? Or are we still like feeling out?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've had so many conversations on this. I forget sometimes whether we've done this in a live show or we've just been chatting. But I think, I think it's a situation where it's no longer remote working or hybrid working. It's just working now.
Yeah.
And to kind of label it, I think, is almost a return to what was kind of pre-pandemic, which is, again, remote working and or hybrid working is almost like a kind of benefit or something that has to be earned.
Yeah.
Companies have operated, admittedly, more kind of knowledge work companies, etc., have operated through, kind of lockdowns. So therefore, the employees, their people, would want to continue that without it being reassessed. And equally, I think individuals joining businesses now, they want to know that there's that option to choose how they work. Now, there might be the need for certain kind of fixed days or periods in the office for, certain business needs. And I think the majority of people will completely be comfortable with that. But I sense from the conversations I have with individuals on a daily basis, they don't want to be told when they're going to be in the office. They want that choice, and they want to be able to have a conversation with an employer to find a kind of balance or compromise that works for both parties. I think, the individual now doesn't want to be dictated to, you need to be in the office X amount of days. I've noticed that shift, and it is, I think it's something that is making individuals either decide to or not join a company. I think it's really critical, and perhaps some companies don't realize how critical it is.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in that. I mean, I think there's certainly no going back, right? Only forward. That's the thing. So we're never going back to anything. It's forward. I think for me, the conversation on like how we work, it's again from the different people I speak to and the different size businesses and stuff. There's such a variation. I spoke to someone the other day, a very like senior lawyer, and she turned around to me and was like, "I don't know how I'm still employed. I do no work. I work at home. I do nothing." Speak to some other people, and they're like, "Oh my God, like I'm so productive at home. This is great. I never liked commuting. I get to spend time with the family. I get to do more work, super productive, etc." And then you've got a bunch in between where I don't know, maybe some young people. It's quite nice to go in. I speak to my cousin's pretty young, entering the workforce, and he wants to learn from people. He wants the social aspects. He wants to go in. And then I've spoke to some companies are fully remote, completely remote. I'm doing a podcast with the founder of Oyster HR, who's completely remote, like just no office. So if you're going to want to work at a firm like that, you're at home or the coffee shop, like full time, which again suits some people, doesn't suit others. And then eventually you've got some of these larger financial services firms, like Goldman's, who they own real estate, clearly wanting people in their real estate, who are mandating people. Exactly. It's true, right? I mean, they're trying to mandate people to go back, and they want people in the offices. So it's just for me, it's still, and to your point, companies aren't adult kindergartens. People want to be able to be an adult.
choose. And that's probably the common thread through everything you've just detailed there, right? Sort of Gen Z's coming into the workforce. They want to choose to go into the office because they feel like it's beneficial for them in terms of learning and establishing relationships. Individuals kind of can see now that they can quite comfortably operate relatively 100% from home. They want that choice. The choice is the key thing, and companies need to be prepared to offer that choice. Because to mandate days or certain, fixed working patterns, I think will generally be a detractor in terms of the attractiveness of that particular business.
It is seeming to be. On the other side of the argument, I think there's also some value in like having some discipline to your day. Like learning, certainly early on in your career, like learning how to work. Getting up early, getting dressed, getting out. Is that like that whole like, we do like we do like routine, don't we? And it's quite nice. It's like making your bed. I was watching a motivational YouTube video, and it's like, if you make your bed every morning, you've already successfully done a task. You've won. And even if you have the worst day, you'll come back to a nicely made bed, which is a great thing. But with the work thing, it's quite nice to learn how to do it. When I was entering the workforce, I had to be in at 8:30. I had to, you had like in recruitment back then, you had like core hours, and you never left before like 6 or whatever. So it did give me some, some discipline and some structure, which hopefully people won't lose if that isn't their experience.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's such a, it's so broad when you think about the different kind of industry sectors. So if we were to take, the kind of creative industry sector and maybe generalize a little bit here, but you're really looking at the output and outcome of that particular person's working day. Now, from a creative point of view, they may do their best work at 4 o'clock in the afternoon all the way through to 10 o'clock at night. So, it's kind of, for me, I think it's thinking about what are the agreed outcomes, employer, employee, what do we need to achieve and when, and how best as an employer can I support you, an employee, to get that done. Now, if I feel through that conversation that actually suggesting some structure to your day would be beneficial, I see that as something that I think could be beneficial, and you agree that that's something you want to trial, great. But if I turn around and say, well, I know you do your best work between 4 and 10 o'clock, but I want you in the office from 9 till 6 o'clock. Well, actually, I'm mandating something and wasting precious time where, that particular person leaves the office at 6 o'clock, gets home at 7, half 7. I've already, kind of taken away time where they do their best work. So I think it's just about being open-minded around that conversation. These are the outcomes we need to achieve. This is why we've hired you, or this is why we continue to retain you as an employee. How best can I support you to deliver against those outcomes?
Yeah, I completely agree. It feeds into the culture. There's a lot of mandating conversations at the moment. Companies are talking about mandating vaccines, whole other ballgame, which we can talk about another time.
Yes.
But this mandating thing's interesting. It's people, a lot of people don't respond well to being told, you have to, you can only come here if you have a vaccine, or you have to come in at, 9 to whatever. So definitely the consciousness of the workforce is changing, and people want to have choice. And of course, clearly, we all want to do well, right? Like, and it's about, good output. And that's the other thing. It's like moving from, time in the office to measuring on output, which again, people have been getting their heads around.
Yeah, it's a shift, because I think historically people have always thought, well, if I have you in an office from 9 till 6 o'clock, I'm guaranteed output.
Yeah.
And then I'll measure the productivity of that output on a monthly or quarterly basis. It seems really rather, I mean, when you think of it in that context, you're like, okay, so you're relying on the fact that somebody's in a location to deliver outcomes, and then you're only monitoring that on a maybe weekly one-to-one catch-up, monthly formal review, quarterly formal review. So you're almost actually doing that in retrospect. So what if you get to the end of the week, end of the month, end of the quarter, and realize actually they haven't achieved their targets at all? So it's kind of, how can we set you up for success now? Let's strip away some of the, kind of classic frameworks that we think historically have always delivered, success, and actually really think about a lot more of a kind of a model that's, bespoke to the person and or team or business unit to deliver those really valuable outcomes. And we have the technology to be able to do that. So
true. Wow. I mean, that trend is carrying on in 2022.
Oh yeah, it will do. Yeah.
All of this stuff, I don't think many have got quite right yet. I think we're still working out, from my perspective, like where we land on it.
Yeah, I think there's still employers out there with a very fixed mindset about how and when and how work is done. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Third one, because I want to get into what our predictions are for 2022.
Yeah, sure.
Time to hire. That was that. That means people are. If you read, hop on LinkedIn and read some of the content around, length of interview processes and stuff. And I'm going to share one of my polls in a sec after this, but people are fed up now. They're fed up with the long interview process. They're fed up with like 20, 30, 40 interviews and then told to make a decision after 24 hours of whether they want to work, whether they want the job or not. We both thought that processes would move. Well, I noticed processes were moving quicker earlier on in 2021, end of 2020, because everything was on video. Things got quicker. What do you see? What have you seen in this last year?
Yeah, I think the kind of advent of everything kind of flipping to video has definitely accelerated kind of time to hire. But time to hire is predicated by time to make a decision. Now, if you've got like an interview process that you can do in a week, but then it takes 2 to 3 days or longer for the hiring manager to make a decision because they're like, well, usually I meet people in person and there's different factors I need to consider now. That kind of fluidity of the interview process is irrelevant. But yeah, I think when you think about perhaps generationally, the majority of the workforce, so the millennials, and Gen Z coming in, video is a kind of default, and it's kind of something that they have adopted and adapt to very quickly. So for them, meeting people virtually and then making a decision based on whether to accept a job or not is pretty straightforward for them. So I think it's something. The video will certainly stay because it does. One, it creates it's time efficient. 2, it allows you to globally recruit. 3, I think the key thing is getting the time to make a decision aligned to the interview process will definitely keep time to hire a lot more kind of efficient. And video is a very beneficial way of doing that. You have to adapt your style, but you can still do it.
You can. No, you can. And it's certainly been a trend that's grown this last year. People still like to meet people face to face. I think I've seen if the role is in the city that the hiring manager is in, there's been certainly some interest in let's meet for a coffee, let's meet up and stuff. Sure. I've seen that for sure. I think time to hire, from my perspective, has reduced, although I know there's many experiences people share online that says otherwise. But I think but maybe that's because people put bad experiences on there rather than good. So hard to tell just from reading social media. But from my perspective, hiring for international companies, I think the times have broadly reduced, which is interesting. And to your point as well, talent pools have got larger because people are more open to location. You don't have to have someone in, but depending on the job, but more and more a broader, more diversity, larger talent pools. So I think that's interesting, and that's still, that whole topic of time to hire is a big a gripe of in people as they look for work. On that note, let me share my screen. I want to show everyone a poll I did, which I think is which illustrates it quite nicely. So there we go. Quite excited. I haven't shared my screen on a live stream yet. So I did a poll, and a friend of mine, just to sum up, and you guys can read this later. But anyway, he's a sales director. She was a sales director. She had 10 interviews across 2.5 months. Invested 40 hours of her time, and we both know it takes an hour to prepare, hour interview,
for sure,
hour to download afterwards. So it tots up and you don't realize. And then they gave her an offer and gave her 24 hours to make a decision. And she was like, what do I do? And so my question was, what's an acceptable amount of time to decide on a job offer? 70% of people said 1 week. 22% of people said 24 hours is fine. So I thought it was really interesting. What were your thoughts on that?
I was in the 8% of other.
Ooh, so, okay, fine.
My general rule of thumb is kind of 48 to 72 hours. I think 2 to 3 days should be sufficient enough to make a decision, or at least express your intent, essentially. So and I guess I look at it from the point of view of how much time that person's invested in the process, but equally, from a business point of view, now we've made an offer, the efficiency of kind of getting an understanding from that person. And look, that may be, so 48 hours, person comes back and says, look, I'm kind of 95% there. I just want these questions answered, or I've got this to consider. You can always extend it out, but what you want is some form of confirmation around position of interest. Because otherwise, if you're waiting for a week and you don't really know, that could be a week where actually, essentially, that person's had other interviews, had other offers in, etc. That post-offer is about the cadence of communication. And equally, if that person turns around and says, look, after 48 hours, I do need another day, at least you know where their thinking is. So that was my rationale. I'm never one for pressuring people into a decision, because the decision has to be made in their own time. It has to be right for them. But I do need to understand from a business perspective what their position of interest is.
Yeah, no, definitely. There was a range of views. I mean, for me, it was interesting because, 2.5 months, but then 48 hours, 24 hours to decide.
Seems ridiculous, right?
The whole feeling for this person who ended up rejecting the role because she didn't feel the culture would be quite right for her. The experience that she's had in this interview process, the red flags came up. So again, it's communication, right? It's actually calling and saying, look, we'd love to offer you the job. We can give you the weekend, or have a thing, or any reservations, anything else you need to find out, you'd like to know, that just communicating. And because you can imagine what it would be like to work in this company. They took 2.5 months to decide, and then they're giving you like 2 seconds to decide. So that was that was the that was the vibe that this particular candidate got. Clearly, many people actually said, look, hey, you've been doing it for 2.5 months. If you didn't think you were going to accept the offer, why stay in the process? You must have made your mind up by now. Outside of the.
I guess what surprised me is that actually 22% of people thought 24 hours was actually a reasonable timeline.
Well, look, most of the comments were from people that said 24 hours is fine, because you get a mix of people that I think there's a mix of views of, like, if you've gone through it, you must know. You must know, surely. Like, before they give you the offer, you must have thought, I'm going to take it. Otherwise, why invest the time? And that was the kind of.
I think if the interview process is a two-way exchange of information, and that person's learning more about the business as they go along, and that's baked into the candidate experience, 100%. I think perhaps 24 to 48. Well, actually, 48 hours would be a sufficient amount of time to make a decision. But if that person's gone through the whole process and actually doesn't feel like they know more about the business, and they're waiting to get to the end of the process to ask those questions, then naturally they're going to need time to kind of reflect on the information that they've received from asking those questions. So it's kind of situational.
Very
and
true.
This is the thing, it's kind of, she may not feel the confidence to make a decision that quickly because she's got a bunch of questions. So
it's true.
I think that's more about the candidate experience,
Yeah, giving people the space and time to find out the stuff they need to know. It's a huge life decision. I mean, you're spending more time with them, virtual or otherwise, than you would do with anyone else. So, I thought that was super interesting. So,
it's a great poll. Definitely,
it's a great poll. I would probably give someone the weekend. I would give
48 hours. I think is a decent amount of time. It gives them time to reflect on the fact they now have an offer. Read through all the details, discuss it with their family, because they will, right? I mean, it's a decision that affects both their professional and personal life. So you've got to respect that they want that time.
Definitely. No, definitely. Well, there you go. So that is that one. I think let's move on to our predictions for 2022.
Do we want to be that brave?
The one thing I've learned now is, I was speaking to someone who was, I was like, what are you up to today? Oh, we're doing our 5-year strategic plan. So I was thinking, wow, 5 years. I mean, that's
good luck.
I mean, I don't know if I could do a 5-year plan now. You could do like a 6-month plan, but a lot of stuff happens super quick. So, that's my view on it. So predictions, I think for me, again, it's there's no going back for me. Like things are evolving super, super quick.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it's a great opportunity for employers to think about improving all of these things, but also individuals. And this was my first thing. Everyone I speak to now is thinking about their well-being.
Yeah.
The work. I don't like using work-life balance because the opposite of life is death, and people equate work to death, which I don't think is a great thing. But more like a holistic view of, you don't have to live to work. You shouldn't be living to work. It should be more holistic. And I think it's more acceptable now to like talk about these things, like say, hey, I'm struggling, I'm burning out, I need to recharge. And for me, that's been an interesting trend, which
Definitely.
I think will just accelerate into 2022.
Yeah, I agree. Emma Freivogel from Radical Recruit did a nice post about this yesterday, day before, in terms of how she approaches, kind of just, kind of being aware and sensitive to, her team's well-being. And she was talking about, kind of sick days. And she was like, look, our team, they just have to phone up and say, I won't be in today. I'm not feeling ready to come in today. No questions asked. Okay, what can we do? What do you need to basically, be supported? And if it's just a couple of days out, it's taken. There's no kind of, well, you need to request this from your doctor and you need to fill in this form and a return to work form. It's just that genuine trust and supporting people in terms of what they need. And I think that was really nicely encapsulated in that post. And it comes into that kind of well-being and happiness and supporting your people without question, which I think was great.
I think that's awesome. And if you're a manager, leader, an employer, really like thinking about, and it's quite tough too, because if you are in a fully remote environment and it's just on video, you say like, how you doing? And they're like, yeah, I'm cool. And then you're like, well, how are you really doing? And they're like, no, I'm cool. Sometimes it's hard. It's very different, isn't it? When you see someone in the flesh, and you're like, how you doing? Sometimes it's tricky. So I think, keep asking people. Keep checking in.
And just to say, under that banner of well-being comes how you work. So, i.e., where you feel most comfortable to do your work. So, kind of separating out remote working, hybrid working out of something like well-being and happiness. You're separating out when they're interlinked. Clearly interlinked.
Your experience, you're going to obviously can experience, but your work experience, like the experience you're going to have doing the job in the company that you're in. Again, it's all holistic. Everything's connected.
Exactly.
Your CEO doesn't mind where you work. They value you as long as you're delivering. They don't care if you're working. Go on, again.
Trust. They trust you.
Yeah.
Really that simple.
That's it. Building out on the well-being, because again, also for me, you also have to take responsibility for yourself. People do forget to look after themselves. And especially over this pandemic, like early on, you saw a lot of companies cut deep, a lot of redundancies. People didn't want to be the next one out the door, and then still a lot of industries haven't recovered. There'll still be industries struggling this in 2022. So I do think this we'll still see this, like make sure you like diarize your exercise, make sure you take a holiday, rest, relax, treat yourself like a professional athlete because you're going to be working for a long time. So take responsibility for yourself.
100%.
No one else is going to.
Yeah. That kind of personal responsibility is key. And put it in, not that, and to your point, when you diarize, put it in your work calendar. Don't have it like a personal and a work. Make sure it's in there as part of your day because it supports your approach to your working day. So the gym or whatever exercise or activity you do, that supports how you then approach your kind of working day. Don't try and separate the two again.
Yeah, I put it in like it's the most important meeting of the day. You wouldn't move a meeting with an important CEO or whatever. Your exercise is just because if you feel better and so many benefits for it. So I think that's a trend. People are trending. The other one's remote work, which is number 2 for me, which we've spoken about already. And unless there's anything else you want to add on it, I think people are still evolving.
I think remote work, hybrid working is here to stay. And same with the kind of wellbeing awareness. Companies need to take their, kind of responsibility and set up the framework to make their people feel like they can comfortably access, kind of wellbeing awareness, even, kind of mental health, either activities or support via their employer. And equally as well, they need to empower their employees to have that conversation around how they want and where they want to work.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was also interesting underlying momentum. We're buying stuff online, right? E-commerce. We buy our food online. We do everything online now. Learning, dating, everything online, and now working online. And I think it's not going to go again. We're not going back. So, and again, there's some fantastic tools now that have just got better and better this past year or two that are going to just get even better, whether it's Slack, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, whatever, StreamYard, which we're using, just some fantastic technology, which has enabled us to have this conversation. Because
100%.
5-10 years ago, it would be back in the office because the files are there.
It's showing our age a little bit there. I think
it was a filing system. One of my jobs when I was at school was filing stuff in going into an office and filing. Now it's I'm going to share the Dropbox link. So there is this whole momentum online, and then you've obviously got you've got Facebook's new parent company called Meta, which is all about this virtual experience. So let's see if that takes off. Probably will. And that's going to be interesting. We'll end up going in, our avatars will be going into our virtual office and interacting with each other. So that's interesting. Third trend for me, which is going into is this talent shortage. And I know you're in the tech startup scale up space, and if you jump on these types of firms' websites, everyone seems to be hiring the same types of people. There's a lot of demand for talent. What are you seeing?
So to your point around, and I try not to use the term because it commoditizes people, but it's a very much candidate-led market. And there's a number of factors that have impacted the talent market in the UK, if you will. So kind of things like Brexit, obviously COVID, pandemic. So there's a number of factors now that are creating a market that's super competitive. And actually the kind of competition for, as you said, say software engineers, product people, designers, data analysts, the competition is high. And therefore, individuals that are looking for a job don't have to look anymore because they're getting contacted very regularly, right? Even if they're not looking for a job, they're getting contacted. And that outreach, as a company looking to hire, you've got to be really clear on your kind of your approach to market. So defining your talent brand and your employer brand. You need to be very creative in terms of the content you're sharing, what you're sharing, why you're sharing it, to increase that kind of attraction and engagement. And I think you need to be mindful that you may not get 5 or 10 CVs of interested people off of an agent or your in-house team. You might get 1 or 2, but those 1 or 2, you need to treat them, with respect. They're precious. They've got to the point where they're engaged in your process. So when you're interviewing them, you really need to put your time, attention, and effort into interviewing them, not thinking this person will be one of another 10 I'll see, because you won't.
Yeah.
You're likely to see a very short list of individuals, but those individuals will be engaged for the right reasons. And you need to be very intentional and be ready to, answer a lot of questions from them as well. Back to that point around a 2-way interview process. So I think, to your point, the market now is very competitive, and companies need to realize that they have to put more effort and emphasis and be more intentional in the way that they approach recruitment and hiring.
100%, 100%. There aren't that many sweets in the sweet shop right now. You know,
that's the way of putting it. Yeah,
a lot. It's, you know, it's like, oh, what else is out there? What else? And I think some of the best stories I've heard. And a friend got a chief marketing officer job, and she was interviewing for 2.5 weeks. She had, I think it was like 3-4 interviews. And they offered her, and done. She was in, and then she was in another process, and she'd been, I forget the length. It was probably about 3 months and 12 interviews and counting or something. And she called to say, look, thank you for your time, but I'm withdrawing from the process because I've been. And they were like, well, what do you mean? Like, why are you withdrawing? You know, just couldn't fathom. And she's like, it's taken you 3 months and there's still nothing. You know, and these guys, they knew. You know, this firm that she accepted, they knew what they were looking for. They found it and they made a decision. And again, that said something about the culture. You know, lack of politics means you can make decisions quickly, you know, less friction and stuff. And people want to work in that kind of environment. And this firm got an amazing candidate. It's great. I was working with a client the other day, and again, it was a finance director actually, and they saw 1 or 2 candidates and they made an offer within 2 weeks. And the whole feeling around it was a great experience. The candidate really enjoys it. It's you know, a nice experience. And so
definitely,
you know, if you find someone, go for it.
Yeah.
You know,
it's what you and I always say, right? It's a partnership between kind of talent acquisition, recruitment, whether that's in-house or agency, and the hiring team. It's a partnership. If you, as a hiring manager, look at recruitment talent acquisition as a service, you're going to be the one that's going, where are my CVs? And you won't get many. It's a simple one, because it's a partnership. You need to lean in. You need to support it. You know, your first question shouldn't be, where are my CVs? Your first question should be, how can I support us hiring the best possible person? What can I do? What can I contribute to the process to make sure? And if that contribution is just the way you interview, how quickly, you know, you can schedule an interview, et cetera, great. But you're contributing to a partnership.
Yeah.
Service, if you're looking at recruitment talent acquisition as a service, you're getting it completely wrong. 100%.
100%. My last point on this is also think about what you really need. Like, what are the superpowers you're looking for? What can you train? And also, look, there's a lot of open vacancies, but there is also still a lot of people that are out of work. And we've never been very good as a society in retraining people, you know? I think for companies, you know, if you've got the ability to invest in training, education, things like that, you know, what a great way to do it, you know?
I think it's a fantastic idea, because most companies hire for the skills and experience they need now. They don't hire with a growth potential in mind. So if we hire this person now, actually in 3 to 6 months' time of training, you know, that coincides with exactly what we need in the business at that time. Because they feel like, well, you know, if we invest 3 to 6 months in training, and what if they leave, you know, after, you know, 3 or 6 months? Well, even if you hire somebody with the skills and experience, you still can't guarantee that they won't leave after 3 or 6 months. But you've got a better chance of retaining that person you've invested in, right?
Well, hey, look, you invested in training people. It's a good thing. You might even feel good about it. And then you focused on your culture, which is absolutely awesome. And people aren't going to want to leave. Maybe at some point, which is, you know, people do move around. But
if the culture is right, you'll know about it. It'll be a conversation that person feels comfortable to have with you and say, look, and you would have, you know, consulted with them around, well, this is what we can offer. And they'd be like, well, you know, perhaps that's not really where I want my next step to be. It creates a very different dynamic of conversation, which is a lot more beneficial for everybody.
Yeah. If you look hard enough, you can find amazing talent in the most unconventional people.
Yeah.
You know, but sometimes people find it hard. If you're hiring for a specific role, it's much safer to go for the pedigree candidate, you know, the one that's worked in your rival, that's worked at Microsoft or Google. But you have to be a little bit braver, and you can unearth some, you know, fantastic talent. So,
everybody has a talent. It just whether it suits your business or not, and whether they feel that their talent can flourish in your business.
Yeah. I'm hoping that's going to be a trend in 2022, but the jury is out for me.
Well,
on that.
we can only play our part in kind of advocating for that, and kind of presenting that as an option to businesses, right?
Yeah, that's true. I'll be doing that. My final one, and I mean, we talked about it earlier on, and I think this is going to continue, is people are fed up with long interview processes, no feedback, and a bad candidate experience. And they're the things I hear, a lot with people moaning about different interview processes they've been on. You see it a lot online. So I'm hoping that reverses in 2022.
Agreed. Yeah, I think feedback is a gift. If people invest their time in your interview process, the very minimal they can expect is some form of credible feedback as to why they were not successful. It's payment for their investment of time.
Yeah, definitely.
Simple as that.
So hopefully that's a trend that continues in 2022. People are still working it out, but it is an amazing opportunity for companies to just refresh, revamp, think about it. So awesome, man. Glenn, thank you so much again. And
always a pleasure.
I think we'll look back at the end of 2022 and see what's gone on. But I think there's going to be a lot of unexpected stuff in 2022, which keeps things exciting.
Always exciting, definitely.
Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you very much for watching. Glenn, thank you so much for joining me. See you all soon.
Take care, guys.
See ya.